Let's wax our eyebrows. Very hairy, and these are not even my natural brows. These are still heavily plucked. The first step is to degrease the eyebrows with some rubbing alcohol to get rid of any dead skin and any oils in the hairs and in the surrounding skin. I like to tint my brows when I wax them, and I actually tint them first. Tinting my brows allows me to visualize the end result and easily see the negative space of the hairs that I want to remove. I use an angle brush and I map out the bottom perimeter of the brow that I want to follow. And I'm not doing hair-like strokes. I'm literally just filling in the silhouette of the brow that I want to keep. And don't worry about it being too dramatic. There's no developer. This is a direct dye. So it will stain the skin and the hairs, but it fades in a week. And you can also scrub it down with the alcohol afterwards if you want to lighten it up. So don't worry about it being too harsh. And because it's a direct dye, there's no concern about it, a developer, over processing the hairs or irritating your skin. Obviously, just be careful about getting this in your eye. One of my tricks to do this is I start the brow looking in a mirror that's pretty far away, like 9 to 12 inches. I get the rough shape in, and then I go in and I fine tune it. The most important thing is really getting that bottom perimeter because you want it to be a flowing line. You want to consider the space between your lash line and the brow on both sides, the length and all of that. The top is more definitive, and I'm really just taking away the excess on the top, but I'm not really changing the shape. I'm kind of just getting rid of like the fuzzy hairs at the top that are not really part of the brow architecture. So the brows are pretty much mapped out. I assess them from different angles and just fine tune. And I actually find that it's not so useful to be looking really up close in a mirror. I'm looking at a mirror that's about a foot away from me, and I'm kind of just the distance between the brows. You want to just use your nose tip. I like to fill them in pretty close together. And like I said, this is just a completely full saturation fill in. They're not going to look that dense and close together when it's rinsed off. Usually, you want to preserve the natural third of the brow. I'm pretty much keeping all of those hairs because that's important. The head of the eyebrow is important for emoting. So when I move my eyebrows, the head of the brow is pretty much reflective of the muscle there. So if I were to just like make that too thin or try to change it or to make it too short, it would look unnatural and it wouldn't emote in a natural way. It would look uncanny. My brow likes to wrap all the way around my eye and hairs go all the way down here. What I'm doing is I'm just cleaning up this line and going for more of a straight brow to kind of lift up the tails as much as possible. So I'm keeping the inside third of the eyebrow, and then I'm just creating a smooth transition that gradually ticks up. I don't want a scooped out eyebrow. I want it to be pretty straight and even in width. It only slightly gets thinner at the ends. Also, don't be afraid to move your eyebrows around to see how they move. That's another way to check for symmetry. A great thing about using this Adore is that this is a direct dye with no developer, so you can leave it on for as long as possible. Theoretically, it would get darker and it would stain more the longer you leave it on, but it's not going to irritate the skin or become over processed. And like I said, it fades. It's going to only last on the skin for like a couple of days max, assuming that you're not trying to scrub it off. And then another important step before you get the wax out is to use like a matte setting powder, and you're just going to go right up against that dye and just heavily powder that area. This will further help the wax grab the hair and it dries out the skin. I use hard wax, which is more delicate on the skin, but also can be a little trickier to grab the hairs with. But if you have sensitivities to wax or have experienced irritation, I can't use soft wax because I used retinoids, so that makes your skin too delicate. So I apply this powder really thickly. This also stops the wax from dripping. One of the hard things about doing your own waxing for your eyebrows is that usually you're laying down on a table when you're professionally getting them waxed, so then gravity's on your side. But if you're doing it to yourself, you have to look into a mirror and you're sitting up, so the wax can tend to drip and like migrate downwards. This will help it stay in one place. So we're done. Just kidding. Let's get the wax. I have my wax machine melting. You want it to be like the texture of molasses or honey. You want to use usually a small stick. Get a little bead and then just with hard wax, you want to go with the grain. What I usually do is I just kind of go to the side. And you want to build this up. I don't do this very often, so I'm not like that elegant at it, to be honest. But I get the job done, and I try to get a thick layer right to the edge. And because I did all this mapping, that perimeter is really crystal clear, even from far away. Versus if I had nothing, if I just had no markers, I'd be up in the mirror, like trying to do this and trying to see the border. And then I'd be worried about symmetry, and it's just a nightmare. The mapping is like the whole thing. Just tilt your head. But I'm not panicking because I can see that border. And just kind of tilt your head to the side. That could have been a problem right there. Also, the mapping with the Adore dye is like a protective barrier for those hairs because it's like a wet emollient base. So the hard wax, even if it got into the eyebrows, it wouldn't really adhere that well. And it probably would not even stick. Okay, I just figured out live that I should not be filming and trying to do this because it was messing me up. I'm just going around making sure that everything's perfect before I rip it off. When you're doing the lower part, you want to have your eyes closed. And ideally, you want to like lift up the brows a little bit so you can create more space. You know, like you don't want the freaking hot wax getting onto the mobile lid like it just did. No, you want to support this part of the face because it can hurt. Ooh, that was a good one. See all those little bulbs? That's the hairs. And those are those really fine hairs that you can't really pluck with the tweezer. Now I do have to go in and like fine tune it a little bit. It's honestly hard to do the underneath super clean, but I don't really care because I just go in with tweezers afterwards. Okay, second pass done. But another thing is that you have to use both hands. So for this side, you have to tilt, and then you can't really reach over. You have to be ambidextrous, and then you use kind of like let gravity work. And then while that's drying, I'm gonna go in and just pluck the straggler hair. And 90% of the work that we did with the mapping makes this so much easier. There's no guesswork because we already know what the brows are gonna look like. Super clean. Okay, when I'm getting to the final stages of plucking the underneath brows, it's really important to actually manipulate the hairs and push them up so you could see any like stragglers lagging behind. This side's pretty good. This is usually my problem side. This is the one I go in with a really close mirror, not during the mapping, but during the removal, because I want to get every single hair that does not belong. And we're done. Just kidding. We're gonna go in now to remove the dye. I'm just gonna use something gentler than the alcohol. I'm gonna use some Bioderma, and just because it might sting the skin that you've like been plucking, and you can scrub it pretty well. But we're gonna have a very perfected, very shaped brow. Now, I don't love the color of my brows because I experimented with lightening them, and they went a little bit orange. So ignore the weird undertone, but very cleaned up, and see, not too dark. And this will fade. It'll fade, but see, it's not very blocky in the front. It's just a hue of color. Every time I try lightening my brows, I like overdo it. I need to show some more restraint.